Alright, so we're going to use the idea of keeping track of state. And again, state is that idea that we are being able to save information for the application as a whole. That we can actually maintain information across different screens, saving the information so we can do more than simply just load stuff. We can actually save information and use it. And so the idea of state requires us in Android that we have to have a way of actually keeping track of something. And so in order to do that, we're going to start off by creating our Android project, and we already use two activities to get going. So I've already started my project right here. And in my source, obviously I've got my controller package where I've got my first activity listed. I'm going to add a second activity immediately because we're going to need to be able to pass that back and forth between the two different things. So I go over to New and Other, and in Android select an activity. And again, keeping with the process of having an empty activity. And I'll call this the display activity. And so I have two activity files right here. One is a display activity, one is a input activity. And then I'm going to go into my source. I'm going to add a new package. And this is going to be my model package. So it'll be ctech.stateproject.model. And the model package is where we will store information for, just like we do in regular Java. This is our model set of code. This is the code we will be using to actually do more with what our projects can do. I'm just getting that set up for it really fast. And so in my display activity, I'm going to go ahead and go to my XML. And my display activity, I'm going to put together a lovely little text view. I'm just going to drag this one that we have right here already. And I'm going to move it up here to the middle, and I'm going to get rid of that hello world because I don't want it to be there. So edit text, and let's make a new string. And this is display results. We'll put in the results are as the contents of that string, just to get it going. Because I don't want to have hello world as an option for anything. And so all this is simply right now just a quick little XML that has a text view that says results. And I'll call this results view because you want to give it a better name than simply text view 1. So results view is a text view, and it has a string assigned to it so we can have that loaded. And I'm done with that XML. Really quite hard. So I'm going to go ahead and in my display activity.java, I'm going to declare and initialize that text view so I can use it programmatically. And so in my declaration section, as always, it'll just be a private, and it's a text view. And I'll call it display view. I'll move my cursor over here and choose import text view from the widget package. And I will do the display view equals parens text view. And our fabulous method, findViewById, passing it results view as its ID value. And so we've got that lovely, great setup right there. Really, really intense. And actually, I'm going to put a button in here as well. And so let's do a private button, home button. And we'll say that home button equals parens button. And I'm making my helper method the private void setup listeners again so I can provide listeners for what I'm using inside my class. And I'm going to just do home button.setOnClickListener. And remember that when I'm setting this onClickListener, I'm creating a new anonymous inner class, which is basically just an anonymous class that implements that interface that is required for the listener interface. So setOnClickListener is a new view.onClickListener. And inside here, I'm just going to do my standard way of going back home to my app that I was originally at. And so I will do intent, return intent, equals new intent. And that's just the standard way of taking me back home to my original class. Nothing new for that. That's just all stuff we've done already. So I've just got that quick little setup listeners method that creates a listener for my button, and the 3 lines of code it takes to say, okay, I'm done, and closes the app. Not a lot here to really play with. Got that set so you can see that. Take a screenshot if necessary. And again, all we have right here is just our onCreate and our onClick listener. Not too much here to really deal with yet. I'm going to go ahead and add that button over to my display. Drag a button. Put it down here at the bottom. We'll call it Home button. Make it go all the way across because I can. Okay, really, I'm very commanding and declarative with this. I want it to go home when I press this button, clearly, right? Lots and lots of stuff here. So I've got my basic framework now for an activity to go home. I'm going to have my display activity, or my input activity over here, and we're going to give a couple different text views, or not text views, but text fields for it. So go over to my text field section and grab a couple of these. I've got 4 text views that are edit text as the type, and we'll give this one a better name than simply just edit text. We'll give it an edit ID, and we'll call this the name text. If you haven't noticed, I can sometimes scratch, just go between the capitalized sections of my variables in Eclipse. I can just do that with, so I can rotate with them automatically. So like in this case, I can go edit text just between the different parts of the name field. And the idea on that is I'm using my Alt key on a Mac. I believe it is the Control key on a PC. So you can just go between the different parts of a name and have it so it'll actually, you can go just to quickly rename different parts of a name field easily, or a variable name more easily. And so we have a name, age, phrase, and blather field. Everybody needs some blather, right? So I've got 4 text fields on here, or 4 edit texts as they are called inside Eclipse, as they are called inside Android. And I'm going to give myself a nice little hint for each of these so I can remember that I want to, what needs to go in each of those different fields as I use it. And so I'm going to go over here to the hint section on my properties for that. And I'm going to say name on my name field. On my age text field, I'm going to do age. On my phrase text field. And the purpose of a hint is just the idea that you can actually have it so it will show information before anything has been typed. Just a quick little way so you can remind the user as to what should be going inside those fields as they develop it. So again, look over my outline here for my structure of the project. I have 4 edit text fields on there. They have name, age, phrase, and blather fields as their name. And they're just defined like that. And I'll have a button so I can go to my next screen, because I'm going to be able to take that information from those fields. And I'll go ahead and put it up here at the top, make it so it's clearly available, and we'll call this transfer button. Save my project right here. Do the same thing inside my input activity I did with my display activity. I'm going to go in my declaration section. We're going to declare 4 edit texts, but I'm going to do it in a faster way. So I'm going to do private edit text, and I will have age field, name field, phrase field, blather field. And so I can do multiple declarations on a single line, using that to actually save a bit of time for me as a programmer. Again, I can do that because I know that they're all right there. I recommend only doing that for declarations, not using that for any way, shape, or form for initializations. And I have a private button as well. My onCreate, again, it acts just like a constructor for an activity in Android. And I have to have these first 2 lines always there. I need to call my super to onCreate, so I call the base activity constructor. And then I set my content view so it'll actually load the view that I want to actually use. Then I'm going to, of course, use my findViewById for all my different parameters here. So I'm going to say that age field equals parens edit text. And instead of age field right here, let that be name field, and then phrase field. So I've got my quick little initialization of my text fields, again using that findViewById. Remember, if you're using copy-paste like I just did, to make sure that you actually assign age to age, name to name, and so on. Because if you do not, you will get that lovely little error saying, your app is unexpectedly closed. Press OK. So you want to make sure that you check to make sure you do that if you're using copy-paste especially, because we don't want to cause that as a problem on a regular basis. Again, make my private void setup listeners. That lovely helper method we will use so we can actually have everything happen. In this case, we're going to have it sort of load that new screen. So I've got my onClick right there. And again, to open up my method, or open up my other screen, it's going to be the same two-line structure where I create my intent, passing it that information. And then it's displayActivity.class, then start activity for results, and I pass as parameters the transfer intent, and the numeral 0, saying I'm expecting it to get back nothing. And I import my intent. So again, in my setup listeners, right now all I'm doing is simply making it so it's going to load the other screen. There's no transfer of information yet. All this does is sets one screen to go to another. This is something we've done already a bunch of times. No big deal. However, what we need to do now that's different is we want to actually gather information from this screen, save it to our state, and then we are going to get it so we can retrieve that information from state and put it inside our other application, or activity, excuse me. So we have right here our XMLs. We're done with those. We're going to go ahead and close them out because we don't need them anymore. XMLs are taken care of. And in order to save that, like I said earlier, what we have to do is we have to make a new class inside our project. We're going to put it in our model package because it's going to be a stuff type thing. It's going to hold information. And that is where our model comes into play, is it's a holder. And our display controller is going to have an access to that. And so we're going to use that with this. So we're going to go ahead and shrink down our screen right here. Go over to our model package. And we're going to add a state for this. And so I'm going to make a new class inside my model package. And I'm going to do this and call Android state. And its superclass is going to be application. And that's under Android.app as a superclass. So I'll select that over here. So again, its superclass is Android.app.application. And it's an Android state is the name that I'm giving for it. Go ahead and say finish for that. And as you can see now in our model, we have our state application, or sorry, our state.java file, which extends application, which means it has as its superclass Android.app.application. So we're using that as its superclass. And here inside my Android state file, I can have a reference to other objects, primitives, etc. I can use this basically to do all of my work of the reference to state. Everything that I need to save across the entire project, I can put references to it in here. And so in some ways I feel this could fit within my controller package as well. But I'm going to put it here in the model package because we want to specifically show the idea that this is where I'm storing the model information, because we would normally be putting inside here all of our model components, a reference to that. So we can then have references to it inside our actual activity, which is inside our view controller itself. So that's why I'm saying we're going to fit this in model for class right now. If you guys can give me a better argument as to why it should fit in the controller, I'll take a listen to it and we'll see if we should justify putting it in there. For right now, though, I'm saying model is a good spot for it. Okay? And what we're going to do, I'm going to make a couple private declarations in here. So my declaration section, I'm going to have a private string name, age, phrase, and blather. Again, you can declare multiple things on a single line, provided they're all of the same type. That doesn't assign any values into them, that simply declares them. I then have a public onCreate. Yes, we are using that same onCreate right here like we would normally use inside an activity. This happens again at the creation of application. So that is happening immediately as soon as the app starts. This is going to happen then. So it's like the constructor, but for the purposes of application, we put it here in onCreate. That way it happens when the application itself starts. This way we don't have to worry about things happening. Inside my onCreate, I'm going to have my data members initialized, and it's a void method. Sorry, public void onCreate. I'm used to writing constructors, obviously. Silly, silly me. And so I'm going to say that name equals blank, because I don't want to deal with null pointer exceptions. Age equals blank, especially in Android land. That was ridiculous. Try that again. Phrase equals blank, and blather also equals blank. And then because this is going to be used as a model, I'm going to be able to change and retrieve values for this. I'm going to go over up here in my declaration section and use my shortcut to get my getters and setters immediately. So I right-click up here. I go down to source. I scroll down to generate getters and setters. In here I choose select all because I want it for all of them. I want to put them after the onCreate method because, again, that's acting like a constructor, and I like to keep my methods for those after the constructor itself. And I'm going to keep that with the first the getters and then the setters. So I can have those getters and setters put together in chunks so I can actually keep track of that code on my own mentally. And of course these should be public. Say OK, and I just saved myself a little bit of time, and I have a whole bunch of methods easily created so I can both set and retrieve the values from my state. Now, had we been doing this with a more complex object, like say for example a spaceship, say a skull, say a Pablo Picasso object, I could have a private Pablo Picasso object right here that I could pass information to. But for just for quick purposes, we're using just this with a string because the string is quick and easy, and it's an object, which shows that whole idea of saving persistence across the screens. Okay, so if we go ahead and minimize this down right here, as you can see, I have just my getters and setters in a chunk, my onCreate method right there where I immediately assign all my values to be blank for all those strings, and those 4 strings that we have that are listed inside my text fields. So I'm going to go ahead and say save on that. Now, this is not enough. What we have to do now is we have to actually change our manifest to recognize that it has an application file that will allow it to maintain state. And this is where we're going to be actually doing something a bit new. So to do that, I go over here onto my left-hand side. I go to my AndroidManifest.xml, and I open it up. And there's a couple ways I can do this. I'll maximize the screen so we can give you guys the best benefit for that. So over here in the application section, I can go up to the name field right here, and I can browse to the application file for it and put it in that way. And that is, again, it's under the application tab under the name section. Or I can go over here to the AndroidManifest.xml and specify it in the applications tag. And so we're going to do that here first, just so we can see how the code itself looks for it. And so over here, after my Android:theme section, I could put it right there. But I think actually I'll put it up here at the beginning since it belongs to the application as a whole, so we'll put it first. So I'm just going to go ahead and press enter right there. And I'm going to do Android:name equals, and then quotes. And oh look, it's already got this lovely little bit right there that I've created a reference to it, where I have my ctech.android.project.model.android_state. And I put that inside quotes. So I have the path and class name listed for the name of the application. So I'm inside the application tag of the XML. I have the field or property name, Android:name, and I assign it the package dot class name, in this case Android state. And it was because I've already made that class that has that pre-built in to put that in there for me. I go ahead and hit save. Saving's a good thing. And if you notice, I look over here back in the application tab, I should say. It should have that listed right there. Maybe I have to close it and refresh it. Yep, I have to close and refresh. No big deal. I go back to my AndroidManifest XML, and I go to my application tab, and you can see that it now has a reference to ctech.stateproject.model.android_state listed right here. And if I click on this link right here for name, it'll take me to my Android state file. Isn't that sweet of it? So it can be, I can browse to it this way by clicking on browse and selecting an existing file. That would be the shortcut way to do it. Or I can manually select it by going to my XML tab, and inside my application tag, I add a field of Android:name, and I specify it ctech.stateproject.model.android_state. So there's a couple ways to put that in there. You choose which one you want to do it. They're both valid. They both get the job done. Of course, you always want to hit save after you're done. So we now have this state object. This state object has the ability to retain information about our project and save it across screens. Now, who here has transferred information across screens in App Inventor? And you had to use your TinyDB and you could save it across this. But now we can actually save objects. Rather than simply just putting a list in or putting in a couple of values, we can save full entire objects across state. Which would be very useful, say for example, if we're doing a card game. And we want to say, for example, send a card to a different screen. We could actually use that information to save the card information as an object and pass it to another screen using the application value right here. So to do that, I'm going to go up here into my input activity. And in my declaration section, I'm going to provide a reference to my state. And so I'm going to do a private Android state. And I'll call it app state. It's a state for the application, right? So app state's a fairly good name for it. Go over here and I'll import my Android state from my model. And then in my onCreate method, I provide a reference to it. I will say that app state equals, and then I cast as an Android state, this.getApplication. So I'm getting the application for this activity, which is specified in my AndroidManifest.xml. So that app state is how I now have reference to all of my model values that I'm using. That right now are listed simply just as strings for ease of demonstration, but we could put in more complex objects inside that state model. Go ahead and hit save on that. What I want to do before I go to the other screen, so before I switch to the other screen, I want to get all that information from these fields, transfer it to the state, and then load my other application. I don't have to actually put anything into that application, or that activity, excuse me. I just need to grab that information from there. So I'm just going to do that very quickly right here. We're going to put it as a method call, just as called gather information, because method calls are always good to use when we can. I'm just going to gather information inside there. It's in my class. I'm going to go over here to outside of my private void setup listeners and make a new method. Private void gather information. So I have my gather information method, and again I have this reference right here for app state. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save information to my app state from the user's input. And so I will just go app state dot set age. And age is a field inside my current display. So I'll do my age field dot get text, which returns an editable. So on that I will call getText.toString. And so this line right here gets the text from the age field, turns it into a string, and then shoves that into the age variable of my state. And so you can't simply just use the getText. You have to actually convert it to a string first, because an editable is not a string. And I will do set name, set phrase, and set blather. And again, my gather information method, I call this right before I do my intent. And that intent, just like everything else we've done when we've swapped screens, I just create an intent, pass it the context and the new class I want to go see, and I start that activity for it. I don't have to create a bundle or anything. I can simply just gather that information as a separate helper method. And in this case, I'm simply gathering that text information. But I could do much more complex method gathering or information gathering. I could get, say for example, anything that's on my screen, get that information, save it as an object, and put it inside my state. In this case, I'm simply using strings though to show this as a quick display. But wait, there's more, yes indeed. So I'm gathering this information right here, my gather information method. I need to set that information in my other activity. So we'll go over here to the display activity. Again, up in the declaration section, I'll make a private Android state. Again, I need to import my Android state. And in my onCreate, after I've declared my display view, right here, I'm going to call a new method before setup listeners I'm going to just do show input or show transfer input. Make a lovely helper method for it as well. And again, by making these private, we can clearly prove that this method of this information is coming not from some other call by another screen. I'm not like sending this information to the screen magically. This is going to happen only from the stuff that exists inside the actual application. And so I just do my app state equals parens Android state, and this dot get application. And so here my show transfer input, I have a reference to that display view, and so I'm going to say display view dot set text parens. Inside here I'm going to do the app state dot get name and a plus of course on that. So display view dot set text, passing it app state dot get name says app state dot get phrase plus because they think app state dot get blather plus when they are plus app state dot get age. So what I'm doing right here is I'm just dumping that information right into this lovely little object right here. So I'm just going to grab that text that's inside app state and build a nice little combined text right here from the different parameters that were already available. And I'm going to show that information by calling that show transfer input even before I set up my listener. And so when I click on my button, it will grab that information from the other screen, save it to the state, open another activity, load that activity, and as it loads that activity, it's going to get its app state as well, transfer information from the app state to the screen, and then set up the listener so it can go back home when we're ready. Test this out on your own device or on your own thing. I'll troubleshoot as to why that's not loading later. But we've got our app now. We can save information across state. We can actually use this for, say, for example, stuff we're going to do on bigger projects. And developer.android.com. And I want you to read about application, aka the class that we are using for this. And so if you go over here to the lovely search bar and you search for application, and oh look, there's android.app.application. And there's also some information about going some more with this, but this is the one that you want to read specifically is the API about the application. This talks about what is necessary. If you notice, this is at an API level 1, aka this has been around since the beginning, and you will need to actually be able to use the information for this.